Hey, listeners. Hey, my friends. Welcome back to Parenting Teens Advice Redefined for Today's World, the podcast where we dive deep into the challenges, triumphs, and complexities of raising teenagers. And today we are tackling a topic that often feels so heavy to face, but is very important to address, and that is grief. And grief is a universal experience, but it shows up uniquely, I think, sometimes in teens, and it shapes their emotions, their behaviors, and relationships in very profound ways. And to guide us through this conversation, I'm honored to welcome Maria Belanic. Maria is an accomplished grief educator and coach with years of experience helping individuals navigate the difficult path of loss and healing. With her compassionate expertise, she empowers families to move through grief with understanding and connection. Today, we'll explore how grief manifests in teens, how their experience differs based on the type of loss, whether it's a grandparent, a parent, or a peer, and how families can support one another through grief, especially during the emotionally charged holiday season. This episode is for anyone looking to better understand and support their teens through life's hardest moments while navigating their own grief as well. And let's dive in. Welcome, Maria. I am so happy to have you.
Well, thank you, Cheryl. It's such an honor to be on your show and, of course, to speak about a topic that's close to my heart and makes a lot of people uncomfortable.
It absolutely does. Let's start with your story. Like, why are you here? What brought you to doing what you're doing now? What's your mission here?
Well, my mission is to redefine the grief conversation, to bring it out in the open, and actually, for lack of a better word, to normalize. To basically say, let's have conversations where we're open about it and not so much afraid. So that way it's not the uncomfortableness that we're making it to be.
Yeah.
Now, of course, no one's ever chosen to say, I'm going to be in the grief arena. I came into it because when my son passed away, I didn't find the support that I wanted. Most of the time, the support that I found was everyone either wanting to fix grief, like to make me better, to get me over it, to all of a sudden get me to a point where I was before my son passed away. So my son, Stefan, passed away. It'll almost be 15 years, or it is 15 years. And back then, and I think even today, there's still this expectation that, oh, you'll just grieve for a little bit, and then all of a sudden, magically, you'll just be over it. You're going to go back to how it was beforehand. And realistically, the reality is that when someone you love has passed away, there is no going back. I mean, anytime that we've experienced trauma has changed our world.
First of all, I'm so sorry for your loss. I can't even imagine being in that situation and having to go through that. Losing a child is just not in the circle of life. So I'm sorry for your loss. And I agree that it's, I'm just coming up on 2 years losing my dad in 2 days. And I think and even trying to explain this loss, work it through with my mom, they were married for 60 years. She keeps saying, it's not getting any better. It's not getting any better. And I've said to her now, I think that what I've discovered is that it's not going to get better. I just have to learn to live my life differently. Like, this is now just a part of my life. And I think in trying to make it better or make it go away or make things feel normal again, I think is probably an even harder process. I think trying to accept that this is the way my life now has this hole in it, and I have to move forward that way. But yeah, I understand when it just does not just go away. And, as we are talking, listeners are parents of teenagers, this is why I really wanted to dive into this, because it's a subject where I feel like it's got to be such a different way to look at, our teens have a tough time as it is, as we were talking before the show started. but throw grief in the mix, throw a loss like this in the mix. How do we start to try to understand grief from our teens' perspective? And how would that could it manifest a little differently in teens than it does for us as adults?
Good question. But firstly, Cheryl, I want to acknowledge the loss of your dad and to let you know that I see your pain.
Thank you.
And getting into and you're right, we had a little conversation beforehand. Teenage years are difficult as it is. Teenagers want to fit in. It's, when we become adults, or shouldn't say adults, I think there comes a point after 50 where after a while we kind of like, this is who I am. I'm going to own who I am. When you think of young adults or even teenagers, it's really about wanting to fit in and not being different.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Because sometimes when we're seen as different, we feel like we're being shunned.
Yeah.
And as teenagers, and I'm going to go back to, because I remember my son Stefan was 16 when he got diagnosed with cancer. And so even for him, it was about, he didn't want to be different. He didn't want to miss out on what everyone else is going to do. So a lot of times I think teenagers will hide what they're dealing with to fit in, and they're going to mask it in a different way. And when I say masking a different way, it's going to be the way that they deal with things. Because I don't want to use a blanket statement of saying all teenagers are going to do this, because they don't. Each person is individual, right?
Mm-hmm.
Each child is individual. So however their behaviors are going to change in some ways. And at times it's just going to be very slight, like we don't notice it.
Yeah. I wonder too, and I think as we're talking, there's the nuclear family, the perfect family, whatever it's supposed to be, mom, dad in the house. And that's not my experience. I'm divorced, so there's a different picture. But I'm wondering how a teen would process the loss of even a different type of loss. So there's the loss of a grandparent, but then there would be how would they process the loss differently of a parent? Like, it's supposed to be this perfect family in my house, and now one person is missing, and it isn't by choice.
Mm-hmm.
How
So
do
true. And then again, it goes into what the relationship is. And a lot of times at home, they may want to show sadness. The only thing in a home, everyone is dealing with their own grief. And at times, and I'll use myself as an example, at times, especially if you're the mom, you'll know that your child is grieving and you want to help, but you don't know how to help because you don't know how to help your own self first. So, and especially when it's recent, like that first year becomes a blur.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people don't know, they're just in that survival mode because our brain kind of shuts off.
Mm-hmm.
And so as a teenager, even though they may be grieving and are sad, they may not show it because all of a sudden when they're with their peers aren't going to understand. The peers, and especially during the holidays,
Yeah.
right? This time where everything seems to be so festive, so magical, and there's parties, all of a sudden the teenager may have to feel like they're kind of like two people. Like they have to put on this front to be accepted by their peers and to go out things. And yet inside, they're hurting so much, but don't know how to express what they're feeling. Because grief, a lot of times, has emotions that come up that words can't even describe, or they're even emotions that you didn't even know you even had, or what the heck are they? Because you could have 3-4 emotions all at the same time.
Yeah, and it's leading me to ask about then how do we have these conversations at home when I'm picturing, I don't want to cry because I don't want to make my mom cry. My mom's in a good place right now. And if I ask, then I'm going to upset her. How do we normalize in the house? How do we normalize these emotions where people under the same roof can really express how they're feeling at any given time?
And I like how you had said you don't want to show your emotions because you think your mom's in a good place. She may or may not be in a good place and is saying, oh, my daughter's in a good place, so I'm not going to show.
Yes.
And we get into the cycle thinking, oh, if we're going to be vulnerable, we may make the other person upset. Realistically, it's that vulnerability, that uncomfortableness to kind of say, you know what, I'm missing, say it's the grandfather, your dad, say, I'm missing dad. Like, it's really sad that he's not here. Talk about the things that you're missing or the things that you're longing for, and be okay if that's where you're at. And especially around the Christmas season, you're going to find where, say it was the dad, the mom may say, I want to scrap Christmas altogether. The teenager may say, I want to have that tree.
Mm-hmm.
This was a good time and I'm going to want to remember my dad. This is how we, right? So
Yeah.
there's those aspects where someone may want one thing and the other person may not. And it's about finding that compromise.
Mm. Are there specific ways to start these conversations in the house? Like, can you give us some ideas on, how to open that up, how to allow, how to give permission?
And this is, I think, the aspect of sometimes when you're a parent, your teenager may not want to open up to you. I mean, I look back at when my sons were teenagers. There were things that they were going through that they didn't, as a parent, they just don't want to share. They want to keep. So I think sometimes you have to be open that if they do share, and just listen to them without judgment. Don't project what we think that they should be feeling, or don't project the shoulds or the what ifs. Also, be able to sit in what they want to share without offering advice. I think a lot of times, as a parent, we want to fix everything. We want to make our teenagers, our children's life without the hardships. All right. We want to put a bubble. And in actual facts, we cannot do that.
No, and I feel like giving our kids the permission to feel how they feel and allow them to see you feel how you feel allows them to see that you're human. You're not a robot, you're human, and it gives them permission to, to really like knock down some of those guardrails that they have up there. And I think that, even if you are, I'm picturing being in grief, maybe if my kids are younger, thinking, would it be a great idea to have a different trusted adult to have these conversations with if they don't feel like they can share with you, or if you're so deep in your grief you don't have the ability to have these conversations in the moment? Would it be a good idea to maybe employ a trusted adult, an aunt or a good friend,
And you're right. It's always a great idea to have someone there who's supportive. One of the things that I've learned is allow the other person to share when they want to share. One of the things is that we cannot force another person to share or to talk if they don't want to.
Mm-hmm.
So the ability really is to take the cue from your child. When they're ready to want to talk, then do so. And I like how you pointed out, one of the things is that we do need to show our own vulnerability. Show that this isn't about fixing, and we have to stop thinking that we're broken and that all of a sudden, magically, like everything's going to be in control and we have it all together. I think part of it is that we want to have this perfectionism, right? Because our minds are going to tell us one thing. Because our minds, are going to say, oh no, you have to have this all perfect. You have to have it all figured out. You got to know the right things to say. And realistically, none of us are going to know what the right thing to say is.
No.
And be okay in that. Be okay in just saying, I see that you're hurting. Do you want to talk? And that's it. And allow them to share. And then from that share, then go, because realistically, a lot of times I think our minds are wanting to say, okay, now what's the right thing that I got to say? What's the right thing? What are the words of wisdom that I can give that are going to make everything fine? And then that'll give them that light that they can. No, grief is just, it's unpredictable. It's sitting in that moment, and maybe even show that, in the morning, that you're giving your grief its time. You're honoring that grief. And when we show that, I think that gives our children the ability to say, oh, okay, yeah, I can be sad for today. I can miss my dad. I can miss my grandfather. I can miss my friend. And part of that sometimes, which is the other aspect, is the secondary losses, because all of a sudden, when you're a teenager, your peers, we mentioned it beforehand, your peers may not understand what you're going through. Your peers may look like they're there. However, they may be thinking about their parties, their things, or what's happening in their own families.
Yeah.
Without really, and so I always go, sometimes our expectation is that we're going to get support from our friends and families. And that sometimes is a false reality.
Mm-hmm.
Because we have to look at, if they didn't give us support from beforehand, they're not going to give you support now in the time when you feel like you want more support.
Yeah, good point. And I also, as we're talking, thinking, this is not going to be our teens' one and only loss. So what skills are we giving them? What, strategies are we giving them to manage more loss as they go through life? Like they're going to lose jobs. They're going to lose girlfriends and boyfriends. They're going to lose family members. So, I think in allowing them to feel how they feel and watch you feel how you feel and be able to work through it, whatever that looks like, we're also giving them those skills to go, well, we're not raising kids, right? We're raising adults. We're raising human beings. And so we want them to have these building blocks that life is going to throw this stuff at us. And I think this is really helpful in allowing them to have those skills later on, knowing this isn't it. This is not your last loss.
I wish we had sometimes like the skills where we could prepare. A lot of times there is no preparation, because sometimes something could just throw us off. I just was speaking to someone that they remembered 4 years ago, they got fired from a job. And that just all of a sudden brought up some of the old wounds that they had. So a lot of times we have old wounds that we're carrying with us, that we, as adults, we may think, oh yes, we've dealt with them. And yet we haven't. They pop up. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times it's about recognizing what you're feeling and acknowledging it. And it's about being kind and compassionate to yourself. Because a lot of times we do that negative self-talk. And I think intellectually, we know things. Like we know that we're supposed, and I'm not talking about positive toxicity.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just talking about intellectually, we sometimes go to our own selves, okay, like I'm supposed to be better than this. I'm supposed to be, and yet it's our emotions. And we have to honor what we're feeling. And a lot of times we are not doing that. And that is something I think we need. And I don't know if we can be taught that, but we can be taught compassion. We can be taught kindness. Mm. And when we're kind to ourselves, it also gives us kindness to other people that we can show to others. And that I think is kind of lacking.
Are there actually stages of grief?
No, that's a falsehood. Everyone
It
always goes, "Oh, you have
is.
stages," right? Personally, I do not believe in them. Never have. And even now, they are actually saying the person who wrote the book, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross,
Yeah.
there was never any intention to say that these were the stages of grief. She had used it for the stages of dying. And even then, that is still a falsehood in the sense of when you're looking at, okay, because one of them would be acceptance. I always go, grievers know who died. It's not like we don't. We've accepted it. It's at the beginning, it's that blur. And I did this exactly the same thing. For that first year after my son passed away, every time I heard a car, every time the door opened, I would just look over my shoulder going, he's coming in,
Mm.
right? You just wanted to wake up from this nightmare because you're like, this has got to be a dream that I'm in. When am I waking up? And so I think that is something that we need to speak about and say, yeah, that happens. You're going to, especially that first year, you're just going to feel that they're just going to walk in and go, the joke's on you. Doesn't happen. I wish it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And the thing is that we're going to have some memories will fade. And then years later, it'll pop up and it'll bring you to that moment. So
Mhm.
one of the things is that we're in a society that wants to suppress, right? We're in this thing where social media shows you, oh, look how happy we are. We watch movies where it's either, you know, like we're having at the spectrum, it's either so frightening or, but yet when they're portraying grief, it seems like, oh, you're going to be sad for a little while. And guess what? Magically, you're going to be better and everything's going to be like just fine. And like it's this rainbow or this magic land.
Mhm.
And so I think when we're portraying something, because the other falsehood is again, you're having the scary movies where all of a sudden it's like, oh, see that house there? That's falling apart and stuff. That person, they're the ones who experienced loss. Someone in their family that they loved lost and they never got over it. So it's kind of like the two extremes. We see
Yeah.
someone is constantly being stuck in their pain and sadness and can't move on to someone who all of a sudden is like, oh yeah, look at this. Magically, I'm over it. And grief is along the middle.
Mm.
We're in the middle where, yes, we can thrive, we can find joy, we can still have it, and we can still be sad. So both things can coexist, where I feel that we need to honor grief, like we need to honor who's no longer here, like be able to talk about them openly, even if that causes you to be crying. Because you know what? Crying is healing. And that's one of the reasons why I called my business the Healing Heart, is because we want to heal our hearts. Not so much that we're going to be forgetting our person. We will always remember our person. Doesn't matter whether it's 5 years from now, 30 years from now, 100 years from now. We always remember our person.
Mhm.
And I think we need to be able to say their names openly, to share stories about them and how they impacted your life. As a teenager, if it's your dad or one of your parents who passed away, share the stories that you remember of what the experiences that you had together. Whether it was like, hey, I remember when we used to go out and have hot chocolate.
Mm.
Or, maybe you went and decorated a tree, or you went shopping, or you went ice skating. These are just little things. It could be just going to the movies, taking that walk with your parent. These are things that I think we need to share. It's in the simple little things.
Yeah. I'm wondering if you could speak to when people start to find some joy or catch themselves laughing, that sense of what I might feel is some guilt, like, how dare you be happy? How dare you? Like, can you speak to that? Because I think that would probably be, you know, in the dynamic of a parent and a teenager, and either way, hey mom, like how are you even thinking about going on a date? How are you even thinking about doing, enjoying yourself? Or, the kids, like, how am I even thinking about going out to a party with my friends? I feel so guilty. I shouldn't be happy. Can you speak to that emotion?
Mm-hmm. And it's so true. I mean, we have it, it's almost like a double-edged sword that if you're feeling joy in the moment, you're going to have your peers coming up to going, oh, wow, aren't you better now? Almost like if you're laughing, it's like you've forgotten about them. And as you say, there's that guilt of saying, I can't be happy. I can't laugh. I can't smile because all of a sudden that means I'm disrespecting. And it's not. And I really dislike the line that goes, that they always go, your dad wouldn't want this for you. Your mom wouldn't want this for you. And you're kind of like, crap, how do you know what they want for me?
Yes.
So one of the aspects I always go is that all emotions are fleeting, and all emotions coexist. And that's where that compassion and kindness is for your own self, is that you can have fun in the moment. You could also have another moment where you're crying. And both moments are okay and acceptable. Because emotions are really, it's the same coin, just on different sides. And one of the aspects I believe that we need to understand is that all emotions coexist. It's not an either or. It's not like, oh, I can only be happy or I can be sad. No, because there's going to be some memories that will make you laugh. Some memories are going to make you sad. Some situations, you could be out with a group of friends, something's funny's going on, and it's a burst of laughter, and that's good. Someone could say something, or there's a scent that you pick up, and that's going to make you sad. And that's okay too. The only thing is, I think sometimes we have to watch our environment, because if you want to be sad and you don't want to show it to other people, take a break. Maybe this is the time that, oh, I got a phone call, I got to go answer it, right? Just to leave, or got to go to the bathroom. Bathroom breaks are great. Just to give yourself that moment or those few minutes to actually just feel what you're feeling. And as a teenager, if you're finding that it's too much, this may be the time that you kind of go, you know what? Oh, it's my mom calling. I got to go.
Yes.
Right? Something like that. And that could be something that as a teenager, you could have with whatever parent's remaining, saying, look, if I'm not feeling something, I just want you to come up and pick me up.
Yeah.
Right? And that's one of the things that I think we have to stop putting this pressure on ourselves, on our children, about they have to be at a certain way, right? If you're at a party, well, of course you have to have fun. Or if you're there, no, you can't go because you're going to be sad. None of us are going to know in that moment what we're going to feel like.
Yeah.
And I think we have to stop with this expectation that I'm going to be fine or I'm going to be sad. Go with what you are going with, and sort of know that you can have an exit plan, a plan B, and have either close friends that are supportive, know that, have the surviving parent know that also. And maybe
of that coexisting. I love that you said that. I think that is like standing out for me. Like emotions can coexist. Like, talk about giving permission. That's such an amazing quote. I'm going to hang on to that one. That's really good. As we approach the holiday season, is there, how can we recommend or talk about, are there rituals? Are there remembrance things? Are there things that you can recommend? Maybe this is the first Christmas, maybe it's the 10th Christmas. Can you speak to that, like as in like ideas or
Yeah, it's going to be really individualized to each family,
Mhm.
right? Some people may want, like some families may want to follow the traditions. And that's because it gives them peace. It gives them that feeling of unity.
Mhm.
Other times when there's been a death in the family or any type of trauma, it's going to feel like there is no unity. Either one is going to be okay. I
Mhm.
think sometimes we feel that because it's the holidays, all of a sudden everyone should be gathering, um, or this is the time to also make new traditions. Some people may say, you know what, this is really hard for us. And maybe it's time that this is our travel time. This is our
Mm.
vacation time. Sometimes just changing the scenery just alters your emotions,
Yeah.
right? It's not to say that you're going to forget, because you don't forget. It just, you don't have to be in that same spot, because a lot of times it's, especially if it's in the home and you're having these big dinners or whatever, it's that empty chair, that empty table setting. And again, I know we talked about decorations. Really, it's about, what does someone want?
Mhm.
Someone may want like the huge tree and go all out, where someone else is kind of like, you know what? I want nothing.
Yeah.
Uh, and allow it to be what you want to be. Because realistically, the wisdom lies in your own grief,
Mhm.
lies in you and what you want and how you want to honor it. It could be just as simple as lighting a candle, having a decoration, having new traditions or old traditions, whichever one you prefer, or a blend of both.
Mhm.
But it's also sometimes giving yourself that permission to do what feels right for you without following what somebody else wants.
Yeah. 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 I'm picturing if your kid wants a tree and you don't want the tree, you could get a little tree for their bedroom. You could yeah, I think there's a lot of compromise that can happen there, and honoring each other and yourselves in that moment is really important. I I just want to, so you're a coach. So at what point do we say, okay, we're just not managing this. We really need some outside support.
Support is really needed at all times.
Mm.
Because one, and I'll go to my first early years, is that you're looking for a lifeline, right? I mean, when anything happens, anything that's traumatic that happens, sometimes as women, we want to isolate, or as people, we want to isolate because we don't want anyone else to see our sadness, um, our degree of pain.
Mm.
And on the other flip side, we want someone who's going to come and fix it for us,
Yeah.
right? And I look at it that sometimes, and it's not so much as fixing, because really what we're wanting sometimes is, can we go back to what it was?
Mhm.
And so we're looking for that lifeline. And at times I always go, again, there's different types of support. There's counselors, there's therapists. I'm more of a peer-to-peer, which
Mhm.
means I've experienced and I've walked that walk.
Yeah.
So my training is going to be different than someone who's going to be a counselor or a therapist. I don't come from a therapist viewpoint. I don't come from a counselor's viewpoint. I come from experience
Mhm.
and what has helped me. And so there is no judgment. I'm holding just space to witness your grief. I'm holding space so that way I can acknowledge your pain and what you're feeling. So that way you can be seen and heard. Because a lot of times in grief, people do not feel like they're seen. They
Mm.
don't feel like they're heard. They really feel like they're invisible.
Mhm. I feel like I know I have nothing against therapy, and I have nothing against psychologists, but I feel like who would have the deepest empathy, but someone who has walked the walk, sadly, but walked the walk. And what a gift for you to turn that around and be able to help people through their grief, that's such a gift. I'm so like honored to have you here and grateful that you do what you do. I mean, it's so needed. And tell us all about you, Maria, where we can find you, how, because I'm going to get all emotional here because I'm so great. It's such a deep emotion. And I think until you experience it with someone that you are just so deeply connected to, I don't think you can even express it. And nor do I think it's the same with everybody either. So tell us how we can find you, how we can work with you.
Well, they can email me at hope@mariabelanic.com. My website is mariabelanic.com. And definitely, I mean, they can reach out to me. We can have a 15-minute conversation, see if I'm the right fit for them to work with. Because again, it's that aspect of you want to build a safe spot, right? Like to hold a safe space where it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to allow your emotions to be free. Because one of the things about grief is we change, we're different, and we don't know what that difference is. And so I'm allowing everyone to be exactly who they are right now. There's no expectation of saying, this is who you're supposed to be. You're on that journey now to sort of say, who am I becoming now? And I'm just giving you those tools to feel at peace with who you're becoming, who you are right now.
That's so important. I'm going to put all of that will be in the show notes, so we don't have to memorize it. But Maria, I thank you for coming on. I'm so honored to have a conversation with you. I'm so grateful for the work you do. And I think that we can probably maybe do a sequel, because I can think of some other areas of grief where we might need some more help and some more support. So thank you. Thank you for listening to Parenting Teens Advice Redefined, and we will see you next time.